Hello, and thank you for joining us at today's FIT Author Talks. FIT Authors Talks is part of the Love Your Library series of events. This FIT Library initiative brings authors from our community to speak to you about their work. From photography to fashion illustration, from fiction writing to art, these talks encompass a multitude of projects and themes that are all celebrating creativity. Today, our FIT author is Professor Kenneth D. King, who's been teaching couture techniques and embellishment at FIT since 2005. Kenneth is a New York-based haute couturier who specializes in evening wear. Along with his private clientele, he has sold to boutiques across the country, such as Maxfield in Los Angeles, Wilkes Bashford in San Francisco, and Ultimo in Chicago, San Francisco, and Dallas. His work has appeared in music videos, television commercials, and on the red carpet at the Oscars. His work is also in the permanent collections of the De Young Museum in San Francisco, the LA County Museum of Art in LA, and the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. He also serves as a contributing editor for Threads magazine and has been an author for them for many years. This evening, Kenneth will be discussing his book, Doll Couture, Creating Custom Clothes, featuring the story of Lola. It was inspired by his viral social media stories of Crazy Bella and her high fashion friends. Doll Couture showcases King's one-of-a-kind designs for clothes that fit the 11.5-inch fashion doll. So thank you, Kenneth, and for joining us today, and take it away.
Thank you. Well, I want to say hello to everyone who has joined us. I'm going to introduce you to Lola here. Here is Lola. And then here is Crazy Bella. You're going to get to see more of them in just a moment, because what we're going to do, I'm going to be like taking over the whole screen, and then we will start the slideshow. And after the slideshow, I'll shut down the screen share, and then we'll come back here, and then I'm happy to answer any questions you have. So let us begin. So share. Continue. Share screen. Okay. Okay, and what I'm going to do here is view. Give me just a moment here. Enter full screen. Okay, so we are off and running. So this is the cover of our book, Doll Couture, creating custom clothes featuring the story of Lola. And so this started out, it is a testament to the power of story. When I was a sissy boy in Salina, Kansas in the early 60s, and my thing was making things. I like specifically making doll clothes. I learned early that hiding out in my room and making doll clothes was how I escaped being bullied. It's how I escaped the craziness of growing up in a small town, Salina, Kansas. And my particular doll was a Barbie. She had her own story. Her own story was, her name was Estelle. She lived in a big city. She drove a convertible. She had a cool apartment. She went to the opera, the theater, and restaurants. Really, she was kind of a stand-in for who I wanted to be. But the beauty of it was it taught me how to sew, but it also taught me to kind of escape into my mind when things were kind of rough on the outside. So the genesis of this book goes back to 2019. I was contacted by New York Magazine. They were doing an article on Barbie as influencer. So they contacted me and they sent me some photos and said, can you reproduce these photos? There were 4 photos, 2 of them I didn't like. So the 2 that I liked were this one here. This is a Valentino. And this one here, this was a Celine. So my brief was to recreate these little outfits in 1/6 scale for these dolls for this magazine. And so moving right along, this is the layout. So as a friend of mine who's in marketing says, I got middle of the page and I got billing down below because this here in publishing is called the gutter. So I didn't end up in the gutter, which is a good thing. It was quite a fun project, but what it did is it introduced my cast of characters. So the characters, let's just see, jump ahead for a moment here. Yeah, my assistant, she was the doll that I was using when I was making clothes, because where New York Magazine came to know of me, I was making clothes for my niece's, my husband's niece in Australia. Her name is Charlie. And it was decided that little Charlie was old enough now, she could have Barbie clothes. So I was making these clothes, I was posting them on Instagram, and this was the doll I was using as my fit model. So in this particular project, I dubbed her my assistant. So she shows up every now and then. She has different hair colors. I don't know what her natural hair color is. So she took over the project. So she then recruited the fitter. So as you can see here, she has her little tape measure, she has her little pin cushion. So the fitter is kind of a stand-in for my teacher, Simone. I trained in San Francisco under a woman named Simone. And Simone trained in Paris at the École Gare Levine. And what she would say is, if it doesn't fit, everything else is a waste of time. So my assistant and the fitter then got to work on these little outfits for New York Magazine. And there's her tape measure. And so what was fun and something that really fascinates me is creating things like this in half or little tiny scale. The pleats on the trousers here from the suit, the challenge here was to create what looked like a pleat, but was not actually a pleat. So making this particular set of clothes, I went into some of my patterns and, I was engineering fit for this particular project. And when it came out, my assistant, where is my assistant? There's my assistant right there. Had a party in her apartment to look over the proof sheets, and you can see here, Crazy Bella is lurking, and you'll more on her later. So this was kind of a fun project that kind of got me going again, just playing with the dolls after a number of years. I've done projects with dolls on and off over the years, but this is what really got me going again. So moving forward, we meet the bodyguard. Now, my assistant has changed her hair color here. The bodyguard was recruited because my assistant was starting to get mobbed, and she was mobbed in Lincoln Center for her internet fame on Instagram. So she hired a bodyguard. We don't quite understand about the wig, but hey, we're accepting here. And then here he has his own little Vespa. So from moving right along, Crazy Bella came in one Saturday. She was pinch hitting for another fit model who had to call in sick. We had to get this little pink gown out for little Charlie in Australia. So my assistant called Crazy Bella in, and somehow just her odd looks, everyone kind of took to her. And for those who comment on her high forehead, don't. This is her distinct beauty. It's what gives her her personality. So moving right, and so they travel together now. Crazy Bella turned from a stand-in fit model to the muse of the studio. She's also, I used her when I was launching the Kenneth King white label line. She said sex sells, so she volunteered to be the model. And then she also is friendly with the bodyguard. So she has integrated herself into the Kenneth D. King studio. We also have Gus. Gus is the bodyguard's assistant. We don't know about the baby doll. This is not a baby. This is a baby doll. Gus doesn't speak much, but he takes care of the website and does other odd jobs. So he's part of the story. The stars of the star clients of the Kenneth D. King universe are the Orloff-Valensky triplets. They are a rollerblading girl group from Eastern Europe. They get all of their performance clothes here. They get all of their day clothes here. So this is they're doing a little fitting and doing a little routine for us in the studio of their act. And as you can see, Variety calls them weird and wonderful. So the Orloff-Valensky triplets have the mail order husbands because, as you can see, they arrived in the mail. People ask me which husband belongs with which triplet, I don't really know. They haven't told me. So, but that's not really important for this story. So, moving right along, after I finished the New York Magazine um, thing, I got this email from a gal, and she had a question. She said, "My mother was an entertainer in Japan after World War II. This is a photo. Can you make a copy of the outfit for me in Barbie size?" I said, "Sure, I can." Now, the challenge with this is that this is rickrack, which is easily, easy to buy in full scale, but in a 1/6 scale, not so much. So what I had to do, this is an experiment, little test, I had to embroider it, and it took months. So we have everyone here. So here's Crazy Bella. She's standing in for the other dolls that are going to come soon. And so this is Natasha, the embroideress. She was tasked with sewing all of the embroidery. And so here we're doing some fittings, and we have the final result. So this is early 2020. This was, I would say, like mid-February 2020. So we did not know what was looming. And what was looming was the pandemic. So what I needed to do, and this is something I really learned during the pandemic, was that I kind of went back into playing with dolls again. So the first thing I did the first day of the lockdown is I took Crazy Bella out in her little car to drive up Broadway and drive around Union Square and back up. So you could drive down, you could put her on the street on Broadway because there was no traffic. I didn't have to worry about getting run over. So Crazy Bella, her story kind of intrigued me. So what I did, because again, like when I was a little kid, I hung out in my studio and hid out in my studio, and I started to create this little world. And Crazy Bella decided she wanted to reinstitute the tar beach. So for uh, people who have been in New York a while, tar beach means, as we know, you get your sunbathing on your roof. So she decided she was going to do that one day. So of course she had all of her snacks and her necessary things. And so she decided it was completely private. So she took off her bathing suit, thinking no one was going to see her. So there she is. But unbeknownst to her, in a building across the way were these two men with cameras with telephoto lenses. And, what are they up to? She found out. So they were taking photos of Crazy Bella. So then the ransom note. Now, as you can see, Crazy Bella lives in the Dakota. She got this letter, and if you can't read it, it says, "We have photos, 1 million cash, or these will go to the press. We mean business. There are more." So she sat there and thought, "Oh my God." So she contacted the bodyguard because on Zoom because she couldn't leave because of the pandemic. And he decided to get on the case. And so what now? Yet more photos. So to relieve her stress, Crazy Bella took her little Ferrari out to Union Square, and she was driving donuts around Union Square. And as you can see, she was being observed, and she got yet another letter. And they finally released them to the press. They started first with the foreign press, then they released them to the English-speaking press. Shocking photos. And she, of course, was completely upset by all of this. Now, this is Zombie Francie. Zombie Francie was the only fit model who could work different houses during the pandemic because zombies cannot get or communicate COVID. So she saw all of the newspapers. She brought them in to my assistant, and my assistant was, of course, upset and worried about Crazy Bella because she hadn't heard from her. And so Crazy Bella dropped out of sight. So friends have been calling her for days, but she went to the family compound on a private island in the Caribbean where she hid out because she was embarrassed. But what she found out was that there was an Instagram campaign, I Stand with Crazy Bella, because all of her friends wanted to show support. And so there we have all of the different people. You can see Corella DeVille, and you can see Elizabeth Taylor and Cher, some of her dear friends. And so she decided that she was going to come back. And so now she came back. She's back in town. She was seen at the airport. In the meantime, the bodyguard was looking over photos from the holiday party and trying to figure out who was perpetrating this blackmail on her. And he was looking at this character here and this character here. So he started sleuthing around and found out that they were both criminals, and they were arrested. Moving along from here, there was a judge chosen for the blackmail trial. And in the meantime, as you can see here, Lola starts showing up in the story. She's in a little pizza joint in New Jersey. Lola had fallen from grace, but more on that in a little bit. So Bella has her day in court. Crazy Bella testifies. She has a news conference out in front of the courthouse. And one of her messages, I'm not a victim, I'm a survivor. The bodyguard, of course, is reading about it. Everyone's reading about it. And her tormentors are convicted. So she goes to celebrate in Fire Island. Hearing this, Carter Brown, who's the editor-in-chief of Variety Fair, says that they want to do a photo shoot. So they're going to ship all her gowns out to Fire Island. And so here she is relaxing before the photo shoot. And so Avedon Richards is taking photos of her first in the harbor and then running up and down the boardwalk. So while she's taking these photos, she has an idea. She had been keeping notes about this whole thing, and she decided she was going to write her memoir. So in the meantime, as part of it, she did some stand-up, and she got rave reviews. And part of what she did in her stand-up also ended up in her memoir. And she sings, of course, because she was a showgirl at the Folies Bergère, and she sang at the Café de Paris in one of her past lives. So in the audience, as you can see, she has a fan. So she's working on her little manuscript, which is called Fleeing Uphill in High Heels, an idea she got when she was running up and down that boardwalk in a pair of high heels. And she then has the manuscript bound, and she meets up with Blackwood Marley, the famous literary agent from Marley Blackwood from the Marley Blackwood Agency. So she meets up with him at a restaurant near the Flatiron Building and inks a book deal. So she's off and running, and this is the cover for her book, and it's finally in print. In the meantime, Lola has decided that if Bella can triumph, if Bella can pull her life together again, so can Lola. So Lola went into recovery, and now we're going to talk a little more about Lola. And this is where the book kicks in. So Lola, her name is Lola. She was a showgirl. This is her publicity photo from the Copacabana. And this is a photo of Lola and Tony in happier days. So in the book, setting the stage, you can see this is what this book is really. It's a storybook with sewing. So, we have showgirl, star, spurs, slaughter. There was blood in a single gunshot, witnesses say. And so this particular photo I love because it kind of it tells the story. Lola, after Tony got killed, sort of went off the rails, and she went off the radar and disappeared, and she ended up moving to New Jersey. So she's sitting in a diner. She's reading about Bella and her conviction. And so she decides, you know what? I need to reconnect with her and the Orloff-Volensky triplets. So she went to the library and went on the Orloff-Volensky triplets website to find out the contact information. And so she met them in a garage in Chelsea. And here again are the mail order husbands. So the Orloff-Volinsky triplets are bringing her to the Kenneth D. King studio because they all have kind of an ulterior motive. They want to get her some new clothes because they figure part of her um, rehabilitation is to get a new wardrobe. And so here's Crazy Bella in Union Square. They all meet in Union Square. And in the meantime, the mail order husbands really don't like the condition of Lola's car. It has seen better days. So they set to work on it. Meanwhile, back in the studio, we have here is Lily. This is Latana. Of course, there's the bodyguard. This is Medusa. She's a fabulously wealthy opera singer, and she was there that day for fittings for her new opera. And so Lola came in, and everyone got to meet each other. But Medusa said after she changed back into her street clothes, we need to talk. So she told Lola, you need to be living in the city. I have a townhouse I just bought on Washington Square. You need to just move in there before, to get your feet on the ground. And in the meantime, I'm going to have some pajamas sent over that I ordered because we both probably wear the same size. And the three decided here that there are going to be no charge on these clothes. So, tools and so what you get in this book, it kind of shifts back and forth. There's story, there is information. So you get to learn a little bit about some of the pressing tools that I use. There are going to be patterns for things, like a little ironing board and so forth, and other things. This is Lily showing how if you don't own a light board, this is another way of using your patterns with paper, and you can just put it up against the window to trace things through. I just love this. This is just a fun little tabletop shot. So choosing fabric, we talk about the scale, we talk about the interfacings, the inner linings, and so forth. So then back to the story, Medusa and Lola are at Medusa's townhouse. So Medusa said, you can stay here really as long as you want until you get on your feet. And she had some food and drink brought in because she wanted Lola to be comfortable. So now the patterns, because every outfit in the book, there will be a pattern for the outfit. So you can actually make the garments themselves. So you can see here's what some of the patterns look like. And we talk about muslins and fittings because the fitter, as before, she says if it doesn't fit, it's a waste of time. And we talk about how you can alter each of these patterns because some of the dolls these days don't have the same measurements as, say, Lola does. Like this lady here, her name is Maisie. She has different measurements. So I talk about how you can adjust these patterns to fit different dolls because we want to be inclusive of all sizes. So as you can see here, we have Lola's measurements. And so starting the outfits, when you start a new wardrobe, you need new lingerie. So we have the basic panty, we have the pajamas, and as you can see here in the book, we have lots and lots of good, quite detailed instructions on how to build all these things so that there's no guessing on this. And she gets little pajamas here. Now, here we are. Lola is in her bedroom, and you can see she's reading a copy of Fleeing Uphill in High Heels because she wants to read it. She wants to know the whole story of Crazy Bella. And you can see here in the background the Washington Arch because this room looks out onto Washington Square. So now, for those who are familiar with the story, there was Tony and then there was Rico. Now, Lola was kind of wondering, is Rico still a problem? Rico is still a problem. So he's the bad guy in this. He's the villain. He lurks here and there. So moving along, Bella is on the cover of Variety Fair, and I really love this little title, Uggs, aptly named, you decide. So this is her part of her article in Vanity Fair or Variety Fair, but this is one of the messages. And one of the things that I tried to do in this book is to put some messages in. And on this one, because Crazy Bella was in a situation, it was a stalking situation. And if you kind of guessed it, Lola also is in a stalking situation. And the message as you can see, aside from the blackmail attempt, Crazy Bella found herself in a situation that is not uncommon, but she thought nobody would understand. She was famous, glamorous, the toast of the town. How could something like this happen to someone like her, people would ask. They would say, what did she do to deserve this? The answer is absolutely nothing. It was the stalker who was in the wrong. So I like to plant a few messages in this because whoever's reading it needs to hear that. So, looking for work. Lola needs some work. So to prepare her for work, what the studio did is they made her a bunch of day dresses because they figured that would be the most useful. And so here Bella has come a knocking, she's come a visiting, and she is wanting to hire Lola to help her with her book tour. So what I love about this particular photo is the afternoon sun. Call me crazy. And so she hires Lola, and Lola has some more dresses. So again, little section, the little dresses, the little tops, the little skirts. She has some day clothes to start her, basically to start her new life. So Lola sets to work. She has hired Tinny and Gus to help her on the book signing. There's going to be a big book signing in the big bookstore in Times Square. So they're helping her with the book signing. And so we have the clothes for the book signing, the little coats. There's going to be little tops, basic trousers. And then at the book signing, here's Bella, of course, posing next to the sign, which Lola is photographing and posting on Crazy Bella's social media account. So then she and Tinny ready the book signing. She gets the pens in order and everything. But unbeknownst to her, Rico is lurking and she runs into him. But she tries not to panic. She puts a brave face on it. But happily, the bodyguard and Gus strong arm him and drag him out the door. So the book signing, as you can see, is quite a success. A lot of people showed up. A lot of people got their books signed. There was a dignitary in the audience, and it was Dimitri. As you can see, has a TV show at 3 o'clock p.m. Eastern on the KDK News Network. He is in the crowd, and afterwards, Lola approached him and said, "Hey, I think you should put Bella on your show." So he puts her on the show, which is what we call the media event. So for the media event, Lola needs some business suits. And so we have the little jackets, the little tops, and the little skirts. So again, because these are fully lined, and as you can see here, there's a little chain in the hem because that's what we do. So out in front of the TV show, Lola brings Bella's new outfit, and they go in. Bella watches Lola and Dimitri talking. Then they set Bella up for her interview. And here you have it. She's discussing the lessons she learned in her new book, The Toast of New York Speaks Out to Help Others Who Might Be Going Through What She Did. So then afterwards, Dimitri says to Lola, here's a couple of cards. Katie King, of course, is the president of the KDK Networks. Theo Goodman is the showgirl formerly known as Gala. Theo actually worked with Lola at the Copacabana. So he said, they both want to meet you. In the meantime, as you can see here, Crazy Bella's book tops bestseller charts after successful book signing. And as you can see, movie deal rumored. So this is all good news. So the cocktail coat and the strapless dress are for the important final scene. And as you can see here, I show you how to get an invisible zipper in the back of one of these dresses. They're going to be meeting at this restaurant called Robert. It's in the Museum of Art and Design. And there is the view from the restaurant. And you're probably wondering what this is. The bodyguard, when he was beating up Rico after the book signing, planted a chip in his neck so he could track him. So he has tracked him to Columbus Circle. Now, the bodyguard knew that Bella and Lola were headed for this restaurant, so he thought, uh-oh. So he called his crew and said, meet me at Columbus Circle right now, which they did. And so here we have, there's Gus. He left the baby doll at home. This is Leo. This is Lily. Lily turns into a superhero when she's not at work. So these are the ones that are going to help him with his task, which is to go into the restaurant. So the restaurant is on the 8th floor. So they're waiting for the elevator. In the meantime, Rico is lurking in the restaurant. But they come in and Lola and Bella arrive. They're completely unaware of what's going on above them. They're just happy and blissfully unaware. But as they're headed up the elevator, the bodyguard and Gus and Rico are headed down, and he gets hogtied, and the police are called in Columbus Circle. So Lola and Bella completely unaware of what's just happened. So they're in the restaurant. So here we have, of course, Bella. There's Dimitri. This is the showgirl formerly known as Gala, and Lola here. So they're all sitting down at the table because what Gala wants to do is she wants to offer Lola an option to make a movie out of her book. And so, as you can see here, Dimitri is handing Lola an envelope, which is a job offer. As you can see, it's pretty swell offer. Receive an apartment with parking as well as salary that Mr. Dubois will be negotiating with you. So good news for both of the ladies in this restaurant. They're both happy with each other's news. So meanwhile, back at my assistant's apartment, the bodyguard and Gus and Lily and Tinny are there. They're all celebrating, and the bodyguard has said that Rico is going to be in jail for a good long time, so they don't have to worry about him. So they're all really glad of that. The two ladies of the hour arrive, and Latana has been working on restoring Lola's performance costume. This is something Lola didn't even know existed, but Latana did some research on it and found it and restored it. So they said, let's see it. And back up here. So there we are. There's Lola in all her glory. But there's one more surprise. And she's told to go out to the parking garage. And what she finds is that the mail order husbands have completely done a frame off restoration of her car. So it is like new. And she finishes the story by driving off, pondering how her life has turned around through a good group of friends and some good fashion. So that's the end of the tale. The rest of this really is, this is the making of the book a little bit. This is the photo shoot that we did for the cover at Jack Deutsch's house. And we, of course, have Lola with her model agreement. And she's being a glamour girl again. She looks fabulous in her new clothes. And of course, we also had to do tabletop layouts of all her books. And this is the photo image on the cover. More tabletop stuff. And when we finally got copies, we could announce copies are in hand, and it was all good. So that is the end of it. And oh
Well,
yeah, let's see. I don't quite know what's going on here. Can you all?
absolutely. We can hear you.
Hello.
Hello?
I'm getting the little spinning icon. So I don't know. I'm going to try something here.
So if you could put your questions in the chat, and I will
actually
read
start
them
asking some questions because
Sure.
Here we are. Okay, good. Yeah.
I want to know how old you were when
are.
you started dressing these dolls. Not these dolls, but
I
your first dolls.
I was 4. I started sewing when I was 4. And I started with a needle and thread. My grandma, I can stop sharing the screen now. Okay. Yeah, so I started sewing when I was 4. My grandma really encouraged it. My mother wasn't quite so keen about it because, it was a sissy thing, but grandma kind of said, let him do it because on rainy days you don't have to worry about him, bugging you because he's bored. It led to it led to a it led to my thing in fashion. It really did. I really my taste in Barbie, my taste in fashion really was directed from there. So I started making clothing for myself as a teenager. My first degree, my bachelor's degree is in fashion merchandising. So that's kind of where that came from. Next question.
Um, my next question is, where did you get the dolls? Whose dolls were these?
Well, the early ones were mine, but a lot of these you can find on eBay. The head for Lola and the head for Crazy Bella were were just they were just they were in a box of parts. I know that sounds weird, but you can kind of, put the heads on different bodies. So that's where they came from.
So, Anne Maria asks, where do you find the fine scale prints for the fashions,
It's just
particularly that cocktail dress?
the cocktail dress, that was just a lucky find. I was at the Goodwill one day. It was a pair of capri pants. It's a jacquard, it's a woven fabric. And, I'm always on the lookout for tiny, tiny prints. So, it's just one of those. I don't know if there are dedicated resources or websites for it. Since they're so small, you can look at clothing, excuse me, at places like the Goodwill, and you're able to recycle it.
Excellent. Madeline asks, did the pandemic throw a wrench into the project or did it help move the story along?
Well, the pandemic started the thing. When I started the thing with, after I did the New York Magazine thing, and the little, I call it the girl singer, the black and white. I was still playing with the dolls. The book came much later. It was one of those things. I had tea with the uh, CEO of Taunton Press, and she follows me on Instagram, so she knows the story of Crazy Bella. So I just was riffing, and I said, what would be really cool is to do a book on sewing with Crazy Bella. And she said, okay. So, I didn't quite know what she meant by that. She said, well, I'll have my people call you. So the book came along after the pandemic, but it was really inspired by the pandemic. The whole thing, and like I talk about in the beginning in the introduction, is the power of story. For me, the idea that I have a story that I'm talking, that I can kind of go into in my head to escape the reality of what we're looking at now. It's it's and it was during the pandemic that I really realized that this is how I survived a lot of the storms and trials of my childhood, was by escaping into this alternate reality. See, I never did drugs, alcohol, or smoking. I was not a goody two shoes, but I just never took that up. So I needed something, and this is what I got. Okay, next question. Is
Beth's
there?
internet just crashed, so I will take over.
Oh,
The
okay,
next question is from Rita, who asks, how
okay.
much of the sewing is by hand versus machine with the doll clothes? They are really beautiful, Kenneth.
You know, oh, thank you. It is really surprising. It's primarily by machine. For example, the little cardigan jacket, there's only about maybe an inch and a quarter at the bottom hem and the back that is hand finished, but everything else is sewn by machine. Now, the thing to know is that garment construction at 1/6 scale is a different order of construction than a full scale garment. So one of the things I was talking earlier about, um, looking at the original Barbie clothes, really studying them. Part of what I was studying was, okay, how did these things go together so they could get these little tiny linings and such? So the order of construction is different. These clothes I don't think would necessarily translate to full scale clothes. I saw that as a question. So I don't really think of these as a full scale thing. But what I have done in the past is I had a project where I needed to make this evening jacket and strapless dress, and I had a jacket that I had made for a client in full scale that I went over to Kinko's and I Xeroxed it at, I had to figure out the percentages, but 1/6 scale. So I was able to shrink a full scale garment down to 1/6 scale. And with a few tweaks, I was able to use that particular jacket in 1/6 scale.
Yeah, someone also asked, do you simply scale down the full size patterns or does it take a more fine tuning than that to get the right
It
fit for the dolls?
well, now speaking of the fine tuning, something that's good to know is that generally, if I'm working on a full scale garment, it is 3 muslins. You know, people who try to work without muslins, that's just foolhardy. But when you're dealing with something on that scale, it's 7, because 1/16 of an inch will throw it off. You know, it seems counterintuitive, but the smaller the scale, the more times you have to test it to get it right.
Madeline asks, are the patterns in the books? Oh, sorry, we already did that one.
Yeah.
Yvonne said, is there any chance of construction videos for those of us who have already purchased the book?
You know, that is something, because see, I do Zoom classes, so I should look at doing that. I haven't done that yet, and it probably won't be until, because the new book, you know, you heard it here first, fall of 25. So I can't really think about doing videos before then, but you know, that is actually a great idea.
Well, someone did say that they really hope that the gorgeous pink gown is in the next book.
You know, that I think I'm going to do, because you know, I don't even have that one anymore. I think I gave that to little Charlie in Australia, but I can recreate it. Yeah.
So for
So
that dress in particular, do you, how do you go about the zippers? Is that a regular size zipper that you just use, or is there like a specific kind of zipper
yes.
you use?
No, well, there's a whole world of miniature buttons and zippers and hardware. And let me tell you, I have indulged and I have a lot of it. The invisible zipper, though, is just a regular invisible zipper. And if you want to know the kind of the technique, if you go on YouTube, put in Threads Magazine, Kenneth King, invisible zipper, and you'll see how you put it in for a full scale garment. It works exactly the same. It's just much shorter for a 1/6 scale.
Madeline asks, are there the tiny tools and such hard to work with, like the tiny buttons and all that?
Not really. If you just think about it, like the little tiny buttons are like little beads. They're, you know, maybe like 2, 3, 4 millimeter. So it's, you know, it takes a little doing. And, you know, I have my tweezers and I have my hemostats and all of that, but not as difficult as one would think.
Nor asks, have you ever considered teaching an elective class about making doll clothes?
You know, I don't know where I would do it. That's, you know, I'm happy to do it.
And then, would you be willing to share your favorite resources for miniature fittings?
You know, I just go on there's eBay is the eBay, and let's see, and Amazon has some good things and Etsy has some good sources. So yeah, freely available for anyone who wants them.
Sue asks, what was the most challenging part of writing this book? What parts ended up being different than your original intent?
Oh, you know, the challenge was not so much in, well, actually, one of the things, the story, because the story was kind of evolving and I didn't get the final piece of the story until the day before I had to turn in my part of the manuscript, because I was in the restaurant scene. I was trying to figure out, okay, do I want Lola and Rico to see each other or do I not? And so you know, I decided I didn't want her to be thrown off her game for this important meeting because she set it all up. And so that's when I figured out the thing, because there are 2 elevators that, okay, they're upstairs grabbing him. And as they're coming down one elevator, the ladies are going up the other elevator. That was something that changed. One of the thing what I found though in the editorial part, you know, getting the galley proofs, that was a bit of a heavy lift, going over the book to make sure that everything was correct.
Jillian asks, what was the most important thing you learned during the process?
Oh gosh, that the story will come. Because this next book, I don't want to talk too much about it, but there is going to be not as much story, not as involved a story, but there's going to be some story. And so right now I have kind of a rough outline because some of the characters in this book, because one of the things I did when I wrote my contract is I own the characters, I own the photos. So, this is my cast of characters that I'm working with. So in this new book, I'm able to bring in some of the others like Medusa, and you get to see a little more of the Orloff Volinsky triplets, and Dimitri will make another appearance. So um, that's going to be fun.
I have a question, and it might sound kind of silly. Do you only
No,
have one Crazy Bella doll, or do you have multiple just in case
no.
something was to happen, or do you have to
Oh
treat her
God,
very carefully?
I, I treat her very carefully because that hairline is making me money. So yes, I'm very careful. I don't take her out of the studio much because she is important. And Lola the same. Lola, the little headdress on Lola, that she came like that. That is permanently bolted to her head. So in the book, there is there's some fashion sketches. My husband did the fashion sketches, and we had a conversation because he was looking at the headdress, and he was trying to kind of figure out, okay, how are we going to do this? And so we arrived at this thing where you can't do it literally. It has to be stylized. But I said, in the sketches, she has to have the headdress. So she does.
Madeline asks, have you ever considered making a film of this story?
Well, I've had people, and this is one of those things that I'm just going to say I'm a little bit lazy. If someone said, because I guess there are other things like websites and so forth. If someone approached me and said, "Hey, we would like to take this story and run with it and make a whatever out of it," absolutely, I do it. Driving it myself, probably not, because I have so many other moving parts and pieces to my life.
Definitely. And I know Beth asked at the beginning where you got the dolls, but is there
Mhm.
kind of a method of how you pick which dolls, like why you don't just go to Walmart and pick the first Barbie you see? Is there a reason behind each doll you've chosen?
I like the vintage ones better. Especially my assistant is what's called the fashion queen. They have the wigs that come on and off. So every spring and every fall, she gets a new cardigan suit and she gets a new hair color. So I don't know what her hair color is. The newer ones, I'm looking at some of the newer ones, especially for this book. I'm looking because they're more articulated. So, um, but generally, I just cruise eBay, and the ones that speak to me are the ones I buy. Let's see, one-off outfits after seven. Is that Linda? I see. I'll make as many outfits as because I've had people order outfits too. Because I make some of these for sale, and so what's nice is working after doing seven muslins and getting the thing right, I want to maximize the number of ones that I make um, off of particular pattern. So I don't limit it to just one. What's your opinion? Made to move Barbies. I like the made to move Barbies. There's parts of it that the part I don't like about the made to move Barbies is their feet because they have the ankle articulation, which I think looks really strange in high heels. I like the original feet for the for the legs, but they're kind of fun for certain things. So yeah. So other questions?
Beth is here now with me. She was
Hi,
able
Beth.
to join me upstairs. So we went through, so far we've gone through the chat, but I don't know if you have any
Yeah,
of your questions that you wanted to.
I'm just trying to see here. I think my question is, I'm going to go back to where your favorite places to fabric shop are.
Well, like I said earlier, I like chic fabrics. There's a place called GNR, I want to say on 37th Street. I get B&J if I want really good stuff. Um, and also just going to the thrift shops because I have found like the little pattern for the little cocktail dress. That was a pair of capri pants at the thrift shop. So yeah. That's where I like to get things.
And for Madeline, where do you find the dolls?
eBay primarily. Yeah,
Okay.
I cruise eBay a lot,
How
and they
many do
speak
you
to me.
have?
I don't know. If I counted, I'd have to be embarrassed.
Um, can you tell us if there were any outfits that you wanted to make or tried to make that didn't work out?
Nothing that comes to mind. Um, Nothing that comes to mind because if it didn't work out, I would kind of go, okay, well, I can repurpose this over here. So there are things that because for this new book, there are going to be some more elaborate designs, and I suspect there are going to be two or three stinkers that show up from there. So, because not every single thing you make is a masterpiece.
So is the new book have a lot more menswear?
Okay, well, I'm it's going to be a red carpet.
Okay.
And so that's why I've been buying boy dolls because and if for those who've been looking at my Instagram, I'm making a lot of men's like tuxedos. And so, some of them are for Dimitri's going to have one. So yeah, there are going to be more men, but the men are going to be really just the black tie. It's there's not going to be a lot of
There's
variation
not
for
going to
them.
be the outfit, the bodyguard outfit?
Well, he's going to get, and my husband had this idea, which I think is excellent. He said you should make the bodyguards fatigues in black. So I'm going to make
But
his
we need
fatigues
the
black. I
pattern for
thought
that
that's
is all I'm saying there.
Yeah, well, that's easy. That's easy enough to do. Yeah.
Um, is the garment construction process different for dolls that are articulated versus dolls that are not? Or like where does it take a
No.
left turn?
Well, you of course, like a human, you would want to see if the doll can move in it. Because when you're on like these gals, they don't do much moving. Their arms bend and all, and some of them, the arms just kind of are straight. So you want to in the muslin, you want to test to see if it's going to accommodate the movement of the doll. But that's
And
like
that's
fitting a
why her
real person.
showgirl costume is so much shorter than her day-to-day book tour wear.
It's true. Yes.
Um, so early on, somebody asked about the pink dress that is I think she meant the pink dress that's on the book cover. I noticed that the pattern for that isn't in here. Is that going to be in our next red
Oh
carpet?
no, that's the strapless dress. The book is in there. That's the little cocktail dress.
Oh, okay. So we just make
Yeah.
it longer and put foofy stuff on the bottom skirt. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
because I mean that's essentially what that is. There's a little flounce that um I that is probably going to be recycled for the next book with the flounce.
Hmm.
Yeah,
To me,
but
that's
someone
the quintessential Barbie dress is that mermaid dress with the, fitted all the way down to about the mid calf and then,
well, when I was a kid, it was called Solo in the Spotlight. It was that black sparkly thing with the little ballerina tutu at the ankle.
yep.
I thought that was the greatest. Had the long black gloves. Now, you see, I never bought that Barbie was a teenage fashion model because I don't know if you know this. Barbie was inspired by a doll from Germany named Lily. Lily was made after a cartoon character in a tabloid. And some people would say that Lily was a hooker. I don't think she was. I think she was just a bosomy good time girl. Um,
Hey,
so the Solo in the Spotlight, that dress was not a teenage model dress. That was not a teenage girl dress. Most of those clothes, the early Barbie clothes, were grown-up lady clothes. And like, my Barbie Estelle, her character, she was 27. She wasn't a teenager.
that very important information. Where do you
Yes.
get zippers small enough for this?
Well, the invisible zippers, I just use a regular invisible zipper. You want to get one with the thinnest coil you can get. But other than that, it's just a regular invisible zipper. You just chop it off at the bottom to make it. And I show how to put that in that section of the book. There are places like Etsy. Etsy really, I think, is the best place to look for it. Etsy, eBay, Amazon that sell little tiny, 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 tiny zippers and buckles and all sorts of that sort of thing. It's a whole world out there.
Um, so what happens if Crazy Bella or Lola need wedding gowns? How are you going to apply your couture
Oh,
expertise
they're
to this scale? Like
They're not
what?
the they're not the marrying kind.
But
But some of the other characters, oh, I could do it. I mean, it's easy enough. It's just, a wedding gown is an evening gown, but white. So yeah, it would depend on the personality of the bride. Because some
I,
brides are like big, boofy, bouffant things. Other brides like slinky, um, smooth, tailored things. So um, I could do it. Now, I have only made two wedding gowns in my career, and they were both giveaways, and I have a 50% success rate, meaning one is divorced, one is still married. So in their universe, I try not to encourage them to get married because, you have a 50% success rate if I'm making your wedding dress.
oh, the law of statistics tells us that just that your success rate does not change the success rate of marriage in general.
Well, but I just tell people, understand, you want me to make the dress, I have a 50% success rate. So, um, yeah. But
Um,
the two dresses were giveaways, so they
do
were
you have
friends.
a particular type of doll stand you like?
Well, these are let's see if I, this little, can you see it?
Great.
Yeah. They're, it's a standard, I can't remember the name of it. They're fairly easy to get. What I had to do for some of the situations in the book is I had to have some little plexiglass blocks made with like, and it's not elegant, but it works, coat hangers with a little hook so that you can kind of like hook, kind of hook it under between their legs to stand them up so that it wouldn't show in the photographs.
Have you considered at all doing doing this kind of design work for different sizes of dolls?
I haven't because I like this size. Now, there are other dolls. I had a student come to a sit and sew in the summer, and she was working with the American Girl doll. That, people there, the American Girl doll has her fans. To me, they're scary looking, and they're like a sausage. There's not really any shape. There are
Well, they're
some other
girls,
dolls.
not women.
They're not women. All of my, I like the idea of grown-up women. So, yeah, I mean, this is kind of what I know. This is what I'm comfortable with. So, now if someone said, here's a big fat check, can you make me some clothes for this? Absolutely, I would, because I am in business.
Excellent. You want to read it?
yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
Are we doing
We're at time, but if there's any more questions, we definitely can. But if there's not, I'll wait like 1 second. But I guess my last question would be, have you ever done, I mean, I know with the gown of the Japanese singer, you did some embroidery, but have you ever done very, very small beading work like that?
A couple of times, yes. There was in 2003. I was approached by a toy company in San Francisco, and it was a Barbie-sized doll. They were wanting to come up with this fashion doll, and this is where I took the customer's jacket and shrunk it down as the
Mhm.
evening jacket. That is really where the little strapless dress came from. I developed it for that particular project. It then what it did was the gal was coming to New York for the toy fair in February of 2004, and I handed it off to her and I said, I'm looking to move to New York, and I had sort of, I had this is how much I want to spend, this is where I'd like to land. If you see anything when you're looking for office space there, think of me. So Friday the 13th of February of 2004, I got an email or a voicemail saying, we found your place there, sending you photos. And that's how I found the studio I'm in today.
Oh,
But
how
but
exciting.
that was, but yeah. And so, but that,
Happy
that little
anniversary.
dress, thank you. But that little dress was, the pink one with the flounce, that really was that dress. So the little cocktail dress is just that with the flounce taken off.
Less flounce.
Yes,
I guess our last question and a fun question to kind of end everything on. Linda asks, would you ever make gowns for the Met Gala theme?
I'd be happy to. You see, when it's all, see, I'm very practical this way because someone says, hey, could you do this? Like the article for New York Magazine. They sent the photos and they said, can you replicate these? Well, two of them were ugly, but the other two were cute. And I said, yeah. And the rest of that story was I stuck a big high price tag on it because I didn't want to do it because, I was having too much fun making clothes for Charlie. And they said, okay. Wow. Okay, then I'll get to work. So yeah, you know,
Did you talk about the
it's
timeline?
it. What?
I don't know. Do you want to tell us, when we spoke earlier, you talked a bit about the timeline for producing this book. Do you want to
Okay.
talk a
Okay.
little
Well,
bit about that?
the timeline for producing Doll Couture. This was a tight deadline. It was in December is when Renee, who is the CEO, said, "Yes, I'll have my people call you." I started it 1st of January. I had to turn in everything: photos, illustrations, text, the whole bit, June 1st. We turned it in a week early. It was a big crunch. And that was the semester where really wasn't having any patience with my students who were like, "Wow, I'm so overwhelmed." Like, you know what? I'm overwhelmed because not only did I have this book to do, I had a 3-day video shoot for Threads magazine. I had a jacket and an article for Threads. I had 3 different trips to the West Coast, and then I had to teach at FIT, and then I had to get this book done. So it was a little tight. The book I'm working on now, my first I'm delivering the manuscript in 3 pieces. So the first piece is due end of January. So what I've said to the gal is, okay, I'm gonna dig in because end of school is almost here. I just got to dig in, and so I've been working on the boy doll clothes because that is pretty much ready for photos and manuscript now because I do all my own photos. This timeline, it's going to come out fall of 25. So I
How
have a
do
little longer deadline.
so how do these dolls develop their personalities for you?
They tell me. I don't understand it myself. Because when I put because I had the pink dress on this body with no head, and it was looking weird in the photos, and I thought that just looks weird. And so I was looking through my box of parts, and I kind of plunked this head on this body, and I heard Crazy Bella. And I thought, okay. And so I posted that Instagram post, and I have a friend, one of my Park Avenue friends. She had done PR for Cartier and LVMH, and she doesn't normally do this, but she saw that post and she called me and she said, "You nail her down. She's going to be big." And Lola, I saw the head on eBay and I bought it. And when I looked at it, I heard her name is Lola. She was a showgirl. So
Of course.
I don't know where these personalities come from. And the stories, I kind of trust that they're going to come. I mean, the whole blackmail story was just, I was going crazy during the pandemic because, as you remember, we were all like stuck at home. And I had several people text me and call me and ask me if I was okay. And I said, "No, I'm not. This is how I'm dealing with it because I don't do drugs or alcohol." So, but yeah, I just have to trust that, you know, the characters are going to come and they're going to tell me what their name is.
So, what would you tell your 4-year-old sewing self from this
Oh,
fantasy?
that circling around, when I delivered the manuscript to my editor, Judy, I was kind of off and running on, oh, how are we going to promote this book and all? And she said, "Slow down a minute. Let's look at what we've done." And what she said that she looked at books differently than other people. And she said, there's so much more than a sewing book here. It's a story, and there are so many messages. You have the thing about stalking is not your fault, it's their fault. You have people accepting someone in and helping them to get a foothold in a new life. You have this odd mix of characters. And she said, this is more than just a sewing book. And I think we've created a work of art. So I got a little lightheaded when I got off the phone, and I thought, okay, I don't quite understand what I'm feeling here. So I went for a walk, and I was in Union Square, and I looked around and I thought, that sissy boy in Salina, Kansas triumphed.
Yeah.
And he got himself first to San Francisco and then to New York, and he got people to pay him a lot of money to do something he was doing at age 4 in Salina, Kansas. That's what I would tell him, is like, keep going with this, kid, because one of these days it's going to turn into something big.
I wanted to say that this is a wonderful presentation that I think is heartening and yet lighthearted and delightful and yet brings this message of hope. And I'm really grateful to you for setting this author talk up, because my personal feeling about all of what we have in front of us is that it's our creativity and our art that is going to save us. And this book expresses that so beautifully that I have been telling all of my friends and all of my students since we last spoke. I said, you need to watch this. It will help, I promise. And so I'm really, really super grateful to you. And I just really wanted to thank you for your presentation. And say to everybody else, if you have any more questions about the FIT Authors Series or how to submit to be featured, you can go to the website at authors.fitnyc.edu. You can also follow the FIT Library Instagram for info on upcoming author talks here in the library. Thank you so much, Kenneth, and thank you everybody for joining us, and have a lovely evening.
Thank you. You too. Thank you all for attending.